There is nothing quite like that feeling of showing up to start work after a great weekend and having no idea what you're in for. That's a case of the Mondays, and that's me right now on the podcast daily with Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. It's a mystery Monday because Bill said he had something that he was cooking up, and I was just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah. Usually you're the one that's coming to the table with an unknown topic that Berm and I have to react to. And to be fair, you know the topic, as I told you before.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but you don't know where it's going to go. I have here in my hands the Athlon College Football Preview magazine that I picked up the other day. I was thumbing through it, and I got to the national unit rankings, like by position, top 10 at each position, and I thought it could be fun for us to, or for you, I guess, because it'd be less fun if I guess, since I have it right here in front of me, for you to guess where Ohio State ranks by position in the national unit rankings according to Athlon Sports. And also, I'm having a terrible allergy day, so this is an excuse for you to talk more than me on this episode.
Great, I love it.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be like just the Big Ten rankings. I was like, well, that's going to be a lot easier. National rankings feel like some curveballs are going to be coming my way. But you could have also guessed and just been like, well, here, I'll turn to the page and find out. Oh, I got another one right. Like, you could have been the hero of this show.
That's true. I could have done that. Yeah, if we did just in the Big Ten, let me just go to that page. I think it would be not all that exciting of a show.
They'd be like number 1 or number 2 in every single position group, wouldn't they? I mean,
they are number 4 in one position group in the Big Ten.
Oh dear.
But I think national. I think national's better. So we're gonna do national.
Wait,
all right.
Can I get a vibe check on that? Is that where they have Ohio State's linebackers?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
4th in the Big Ten.
I was sitting at a Little Mermaid dance/gymnastics recital on Sunday and thinking that it was the Big Ten rankings. And I was like, I wonder which one people think is Ohio State's quote unquote worst unit. And I thought it was probably the unproven situation at linebacker.
It is the unproven situation at linebacker, but I'll tell you this. Ohio State is ranked in the top 10 nationally at every position group. Okay. So even though that is considered, the linebackers are considered Ohio State's worst position group, they do show up in the top 10.
Okay.
All right. So, let's start with the quarterbacks. Where do you think the quarterbacks are ranked in the national unit rankings?
Let's see. I assume that they're not going to be ahead of Georgia. I think for some reason people will continue to overestimate Lincoln Riley's quarterback room. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I would think that nationally, Athlon has Ohio State probably around 4th or 5th.
Has Ohio State 3rd?
3rd, really? Okay.
Yeah. Behind number 1 Texas, because I guess they're doing the whole room there with Quinn and Arch. Number 2 Georgia. Ohio State is 3rd, and this will make you happy. USC nowhere to be found, not in the top 10.
Well, that is a lovely surprise. Yeah, I guess it's my own, I don't know, lingering Quinn Ewers fatigue that probably my mind didn't go there. And I also just don't really think that Arch Manning is, he's way too much of an unknown for me based on the talent level he faced in high school. This doesn't have to be a show about Texas. I understand that with recruiting rankings for both Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. That makes sense to me. And I don't know about the overall depth of the room for Georgia behind Carson Beck compared to what Ohio State has at the top with a proven quarterback in Will Howard and with Devin Brown. And then the rest of that group that we all know pushing with at least 4 stars to each of their names for the other 3 guys. I think that's, again, it's obvious. I think that's slightly higher than where I would have pegged it, but I don't think, and you tell me if I'm wrong, like, I don't think that Ohio State would trade its room for either Texas or Georgia's personally.
I don't know. Not if I had to swap the whole room. No. I think like on a 1-year sample size, they'd probably take Carson Beck over Will Howard, but totality of the room, I think you're definitely right there. And that's part of it too, right? It's the depth of the room. It's not merely the starter, but I still am surprised that I thought Oregon might be ahead of them with Dylan Gabriel as a transfer, and they got Dante Moore as a transfer as well as like a young former 5-star prospect behind Dylan Gabriel. And like Jalen Milroe is back at Alabama, and I understand there are questions about the fit with he and the Kalen DeBoer offense, and I have questions about that. But like, he was a quarterback that took a team to the playoff last year, and he's behind Ohio State as well. So Ole Miss was 6, Notre Dame 7, Kansas 8, Colorado 9, and Tennessee 10. I won't run through all the schools at every position, but I thought quarterback probably made sense. Yeah, Jalen Daniels is back. So
I mean,
yeah,
I think he's good. I think he's good. We can start with that premise as well. Like, this isn't to quibble with anyone else's personal opinions on the rankings, but like, I never know for sure. If you're talking about unit strength, like 1 through 5, I just don't think that Ohio State has anything that could be trumped. 1 versus 1, I'm not suggesting that Will Howard or Devin Brown are the best quarterbacks in the country, or that they are in a position that's better than what Beck or Ewers has at Texas and Georgia, respectively. I'm not. That's not the case. But it never feels like the criteria are always applied the same way across those groups, and like for quarterback especially. And if this is true about be ready to play 16, 17 games, I think Ohio State is better positioned to absorb a situation where they'd have to go to a backup quarterback than maybe anybody else. But I can respect anyone else's opinion on that.
I think you are right that Ohio State is best positioned to navigate like potential injuries and bumps and bruises, that kind of stuff. The depth in the room is pretty impressive. All right, running backs. Where do you think Ohio State's running backs rank nationally?
If they're not number 1, I'm gonna lose my mind.
They are, in fact, number 1. Penn State. I'll give you the top 5. Ohio State. Penn State is 2. Georgia is 3. Alabama is 4. Texas is 5. But yeah, I think that's Ohio State, and I'd imagine that's a comfortable Ohio State too, based off how the rest of that list shakes out.
Yeah, I don't know how anybody could argue with it personally. I actually saw some conversation in Big Ten circles about, well, Donovan Edwards is still at Michigan, and that backfield's going to run the ball. I don't know where a lot of that's coming from, and Athlon here didn't fall into some of that discussion there with Penn State's backfield being at number 2. I have seen some of it though, Bill, and I don't. Again, it's a situation of the depth of the room. I thought there was, a case last year that even when Blake Corum was there, that Ohio State's, that group with Chip Trayanum and Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson still back was like, I think that might still be better than Michigan's. Didn't wind up being the case in terms of productivity or championships, but even without Dallin Hayden here, that 1-2 punch at the top, and I think what we saw was pretty encouraging from James Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon throughout spring, and a healthy TC Caffey had already flashed in those late walk-on opportunities. So like, that's a spot where I think clearly people recognize you're not going to be able to top what Henderson and Judkins can do there.
Yeah, and like I like Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton at Penn State, but I would take Travion and Quinshon over them 100 times out of 100. The most interesting thing on the running backs list is Michigan is not in the top 10.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Not a lot of love there, I guess, for Donovan Edwards, and I guess Khalil Mullings is our number 2 back. So, yeah, not seeing Michigan there is a little jarring. But Ohio State is 1, I think, clearly, and Penn State is the only other Big Ten team.
I'm a little bit surprised by that.
Yeah. All right, get ready to get angry. Receivers.
I can understand if there are skeptics about only having one proven starting caliber receiver. I'm using those terms loosely, and like not just falling all over themselves and putting Jeremiah Smith immediately in the starting lineup and immediately amongst the best wide receivers in the country. I get it if that's what we're building to, but I don't know what other room you could point to and say that's absolutely unequivocally going to be better than what Ohio State has. So I'm going to guess that they have them 5th.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. You won't be angry then, because I think you're right. Like some healthy skepticism, I suppose, is warranted, and it does seem like there's a little bit of that here with Ohio State as it pertains to the national unit rankings, which is why they're merely 2nd in the country.
Second. Oh,
yes. Behind number 1 Oregon.
Well, that's stupid.
It's
I don't
interesting. Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know how you
because
get that one. Like, if you were gonna pick a name out of the hat to put over Ohio State, I don't know if Oregon would have that many ping pong balls in there.
yeah, I don't know that. I don't know. Maybe Missouri. Maybe you might put up there, but so Oregon's in a similar situation, I think, to Ohio State, where it's like they have a guy back that Oregon has Tej Johnson back, and it has Trayshawn Holden back too. But like Tej Johnson was like far more productive for Oregon's
Mhm.
offense last year, and then they bring in Evan Stewart as like a former 5-star guy, high profile transfer. That to me feels like is just as much resetting as Ohio State's room. Um, so it's odd to me that Oregon got the nod there. But yeah, it's Oregon, Ohio State, Ole Miss 3, Missouri 4, and Texas 5. No other Big Ten teams on the list, but they do have the top 2.
I think Missouri's got a heck of a position group there, and based on what we
Yeah.
saw down in Dallas as well, uh, and a lot of people that Ohio State recruited at
Mhm.
wide receiver, which is not a spot that they often find themselves in specific to that team, or even that they lose a lot of the recruitments that they want to win. So I think I probably would have listened to that argument again, and I said it from the start. Like, I understand if there are people like, I don't think Athlon does any of their position ranking. I think they generally do a good job, and I don't think they do it just for attention the way that maybe other outlets, I'm not naming them or pointing fingers directly. Like, sometimes you do these and you want to have some traction and attention. Like, I don't think
Mhm.
Athlon's doing that in this case, and certainly not if they have them second. But if people had them at the Buckeyes at fourth or fifth, I can understand it. I still think that they're going to be the top wide receiving group in the country by the end of the season.
Yeah.
But in June, I think it's understandable why you might say, well, go ahead and prove it first.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, the position rankings are done at least in some part based off feedback from coaches. Like it's not a straight poll. They don't ask every coach to rank their top 10, but I think they do get a lot of feedback to generate these lists. So like, yeah, they definitely have merit to me. Um, Offensive line to round out the offense. There's no tight end group, so O line is the last offensive group.
I assume that if they rank tight ends, that group would be lower than linebacker,
Yeah,
not in the top 10.
they're
And,
well. I don't know. Yeah, they didn't do tight ends. So I think you're right. But
well,
sorry, where do you think they have offensive line?
I think they'll have Ohio State's offensive line fourth in the country.
Oh no, not 4.
Okay,
10, 10th.
10. I couldn't figure out if they were looking at those same PFF numbers that you and I have been pouring over that suggest Ohio State's offensive line was actually a lot better than it got credit for last year.
Yeah, I suppose they could have. I'll give the top 10 here. So it's Georgia that returns quite a bit, especially they have on the interior. LSU is number 2 with 2 tackles. That'll probably be 2 top 10 draft picks or top 15 draft picks. Texas is 3. Oregon is 4. I think bringing back all but 1 starter from a pretty good line last year. Alabama is 5, bringing back most of what it had last year. The ones that kind of surprised me a little bit, but I think they're good offensive lines that are ahead of Ohio State's. Tennessee at 6, Miami at 7, Missouri at 8, and Oklahoma State at 9.
Okay. I guarantee you that Miami and Oklahoma State do not have better offensive line play than the Buckeyes this year. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I think there's Oklahoma State had really good O-line play last year, running the ball with Ali Gordon, like they were one of the better rushing teams in the country. And I think they bring back all 5 starters, if I'm not mistaken. So like I get it. Like it's not none of this I think is unearned. Um, but if you want to talk like ceiling and projection for 2024, I think I'm inclined to agree with you. But I also think that being in the top 10 for an offensive line that struggled for parts of last year and is not exactly the same, but pretty similar to last year, to be in the top 10, I think is a nod of respect on some level for Ohio State to be in the top 10 right now.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's probably a reflection of what we're talking about, that they did grade out better while also acknowledging that they were not perfect and
Mhm.
at times not even all that close to it.
Yeah.
This is not when I bring up these things about Josh Simmons and Josh Fryer and their grades and Donovan Jackson's performance, and again, with this usual caveat of PFF grains of salt, it is not. I'm not doing that to say, oh, everything's okay. Like they could take what they had last year and that was just fine. And maybe that could be true if they had more mobility at quarterback or different approach to play calling that at times, again, was like a little bit maddening and frustrating to watch, or, tweaks to the run game that we're all expecting will happen with Chip Kelly. Like maybe that level would be okay. But that's not my point. I do think that there is an element that it was just better than the perception that it was awful, which I don't think is accurate. And again, that's one generic straw man that I'm arguing with on that. I don't know where to actually peg them nationally in terms of those rankings, but like they were probably a top 20-ish group a year ago.
Yeah.
And I think they're largely viewed as much worse than that when they were not. And then they get more experience with both tackles coming back. They have Donovan Jackson still over there for another year in the starting lineup. They certainly dramatically upgraded in terms of veteran experience at what we assume is going to be center. And then you have nobody worse than a 4-star that you're evaluating for the final spot on the offensive line. Like that's a very solid place to be working from.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think, and I also think it's a question of how good's the line need to be for Ohio State to do what it wants to do. And that's a little bit of a moving target for me, to be honest. Like, I feel like I need to get a better assessment of quarterback play before I could answer that, really. But if the offensive line is going to perform like a top 10 offensive line, then I think that's plenty good enough. So even if there's something short of that, which I probably don't think they will be, I actually think this offensive line could be pretty good this year. But being in the top 10 on this particular list anyway, I think is a good starting spot. So that wraps up the offense. So quarterbacks were 3, running backs 1, receivers 2, offensive line 10. We'll move over to defense now. With the defensive line, where do you think the Ohio State defensive line unit ranks in these national position rankings?
I have a suspicion that Athlon puts Ohio State 3rd.
No, Athlon has put Ohio State number 1.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
There's usually a love affair with Georgia, and I thought there was an outside chance that the Michigan meat in the middle might elevate them. I thought that was possible.
Yeah, no, I would have assumed the same. So Ohio State is 1, Michigan's 2, Georgia is 3, Penn State is 4, Alabama is 5. No other Big Ten teams in the top 10.
Hey, look, I definitely don't think that Athlon is wrong. Maybe I'm trained to think Ohio State is not always going to get those top spots across every position unit, which is fine. Like no team has the number 1 group at every single spot, or else they wouldn't play any of the games. But I do think there's if when I'm thinking about other rankings that might not have Ohio State number 1, or maybe there won't be any. I haven't seen them all at this point. I think like you could say some of the things that we occasionally point to, which is like JT Tuimoloau had a great first half of the year and maybe didn't put up in the individual numbers as strongly in the second half of last season. Mm-hmm. Inverse for Jack Sawyer, like they haven't put a full season together yet, and maybe we want to see that. And they lose Mike Hall. Maybe there's going to be a dip in production at defensive tackle. Like I don't think any of me, you, or Berm, like I don't think that that's really what we're expecting. But I could understand from the outside, like you could justifiably point to those as reasons not to have Ohio State at number 1. And kudos to Athlon, I guess, for not doing that.
It is interesting to me. I feel like that the outside or the perception of Jack and JT, like outside of the Ohio State fan base, is a little better maybe than it is at times within the fan base. And it's not like I don't sense from anybody that we interact who's an Ohio State fan who thinks that like JT and Jack are bad. It's just that the bar is so high here. So like when you have the Bosa's and Chase Young and guys before them to compare them to, like it's hard to hold up sometimes. But I don't think that people like doing these lists or like doing preseason All-American stuff or certainly like projecting draft stuff really take any of that into account. So then those guys tend to come out looking perhaps a little bit better, maybe than they would if you asked Ohio State fans to rank the position groups around the country. Although I do think going into the season, you probably get a lot of number 1s anyway, because I think people are very excited about what this defensive line could be, even with maybe some of the depth questions behind the top 4. But I'm not terribly surprised to see Ohio State 1. I I probably would have guessed Michigan was number one, but I would have guessed that Ohio State was number two. So this Athlon flip flopped them there.
Yeah, I think you can see how nationally it might be easier, and maybe that's a good reminder for those of us that cover Ohio State and see them every day, because they're somebody putting together these rankings can be like, I've seen JT Tuimoloau in 3 games where he was just freaking awesome. Like, he's one of the best defensive ends in the country. Like, I saw Jack Sawyer in 3 other games at the end of last year, and that dude was freaking awesome. They got them both coming back. Like, holy cow, that's good. And we're like, well, yeah. Well, one was at the first half of the year, and the other was the second half of the year. And like, we hold that as like, we're nitpicking. And outside, they're like, hey, dum-dums. They're just really good players. Like, they don't have to both go off at the same time.
Yeah, and then so there's respect for those guys, and there's also a ton of respect for Tyleek too. I actually think he's not on this cover. Who's the Ohio State player on this cover?
Looked like Travion
is on this cover, but I saw Phil Steele tweet last week that he had finished up his magazine, and I think Tyleek is on one of the regional covers. So he's a guy too that I think is going to be on a lot of these preseason like All-American type lists.
We saw him last week at Ohio State recruiting camps. That dude looks like clearly in the best shape of his career.
He sure does. Yeah. All right, let's get to the linebackers. We know they're ranked because I gave that away. Where do you think Ohio State's linebackers are ranked nationally?
Probably 8th.
They're 7th, which
okay.
I think is like a very high and very respectable ranking for a group that lost to 2 guys who played like almost every meaningful snap the last 2 years. This is a lot of, I think, respect for Cody Simon, certainly, but then projection for like CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles. I think so. This is, I think, the most interesting ranking that Ohio State has here for this group to be turning over so much and still be considered a top 10 unit in the country.
I wonder how much credence they gave to just Sonny Styles has already been a productive starting defensive player, and if he's going in the box, we're just going to lump his numbers in there with Cody Simons and things look good. Like, we still expect at least some healthy competition, if not full out rotation, going into August 31st in September with CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles. But I wonder if maybe they got a bump there just because Sonny has already proven that he can be a reliable high-end defender, even if it wasn't at linebacker.
Yeah. Or maybe whoever put this together just listens to the podcast daily and saw that we've had 14 episodes devoted to Sonny Styles and CJ Hicks and just thought, those guys must be good. I guess we'll put them in the top 10. I don't know.
It's a decent chance. Plus, I think both of those guys had pretty decent recruiting rankings. Sometimes that's a tiebreaker.
Yeah. And I think that room probably too, if you averaged it out, I'd imagine Ohio State's linebacker room, like recruiting stars pedigree wise, matches up pretty well. And probably better than most places. A lot of Big Ten,
Bill might be scared of James Laurinaitis.
That's a good point. It's a good point. I did not take into account the ability of the position coach to like beat you in a fight if he got mad about your rankings, which maybe we should. Iowa's 3rd, Michigan's 4th, Oregon's 6th, Ohio State is 7th, as we said, and Penn State is 8th. So not surprising that we see a lot of Big Ten flavor on this list. And then lastly, we have the defensive backs, corners and safeties. What was
number one? Number one.
Correct. Correct. Ohio State has the best secondary in college football, according to these rankings. And I would hope according to everyone's rankings, because I do not know how you could have any other opinion other than the Buckeyes have the best secondary in the country.
BICF doesn't really roll off the tongue. I don't know if best in college football is going to work. My suggestion, hear me out. BIA. What do you think?
That has a nice ring to it. I think I like it.
Kudos to Tim Walton and Jim Knowles for what they've done, rebuilding, reloading, revamping, and reclaiming that moniker. Like, this is truly going to be a fun group to watch. Thinking back to really that 2016 group that put it on the map in a way that made sense. Like, this will be a version that I don't know. It could be better than that one.
I think, well, it's the combination of corner and safety play. And I don't know, in 2016, they were really good at both, but I feel like other years, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm being prisoner of the moment, but I feel like other years they've been really good at corner and like good enough at safety, but the stars of the show were the cornerbacks. And this just feels like you got dudes all over the place.
I think that was definitely. I think that was definitely the case for 19, and that's not to be.
Yeah,
like 16 was pretty special. I think back
with
there
Malik Hooker.
with Malik
Yeah, in the
Hooker.
corners. Yeah,
But your point, you make a good point, because we know how valuable Jordan Fuller was, and he's still going quite strong at the NFL level when he gets good health. But like, you don't really. The corners were definitely what elevated everything, and a pass rush that was anchored by a Heisman Trophy finalist. But I'm only bringing that up to say that I agree with your point.
Yeah, and so the Ohio State's number one, and honestly, it feels like we're back into the mode of they're going to be in that conversation for number one moving forward with what we know they're going to have coming back on the roster next year, and what they're doing in recruiting right now is insane. Not to steal Berm's thunder, but they added Fahim Delane over the weekend, the number 2 safety in the country, to go along with a couple of 5-star corners, and it's turning into a bit of a machine in Ohio State secondary. So of course they're number one. Georgia's 2, Notre Dame's 3, Michigan is 4, which I actually think is interesting. Will Johnson's very good, but I don't know if I'd rank that whole unit number 4. Iowa is 5, despite losing Cooper DeJean. And then Penn State is 7, and Oregon is 8, to round out teams that Ohio State will play this year.
Well, I think I did okay in that.
You did pretty good, yeah. And at times you were you prepared yourself to be angry. You actually ended up being surprised by what Athlon did. So shout out to Athlon.
That's good. I didn't have to really launch into any rants, which is the way you don't want to start your Monday like that. We have there will be other opportunities this week. I did want to rant, and maybe I still will later this week with Bill when we get into some other topics. But we'll be at Roosters later on for the live show. We're going to have some snap judgments brought to you by Buyers Auto this week, because there are more camps. Berm will be talking at some point some stuff about commits and about more visitors, and certainly about camp. So, and then maybe another Fairway Columbus trip as well for some Buck Nines, and maybe stay tuned for that as well. Point is, middle of June and business is picking back up. It feels like ball is right around the corner. We're excited. We're going to talk about everything that we possibly can that's going on with the Ohio State Buckeyes. Thanks for starting your week with us right here on the Podcast Daily for Monday. He is Bill. I am Austin. We'll talk to you later.